Welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So, as always, we like to start by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we're on, as well as our ancestors and elders whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build and share and learn together for our collective liberation. So, I just want to start by having you introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners and tell us the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Jeff Klein. I live in the town that is colonially known as Toronto, and I've lived here for about 4 years. Moved here in 2019 from the Seattle, Washington area. I grew up in Baltimore, married a Canadian, so that's how I ended up getting out here. So yeah, so I'm involved so at the moment I'm a consultant for kind of in the economic development space, but also in the well-being space. So I think a lot about communities and well-being and social or economic justice, and just sort of take on projects that focus on helping communities. I mean, my overall focus is in just wanting a world where the people in it achieve at least a baseline level of decent well-being and quality of life. And I feel like that's way out of balance right now everywhere. So I just try to take on projects that focus on whatever we can do to rebalance that in various directions. So in the past, I've done agency work. I've been the executive director of an agency in the US that focused on financial counseling and integrating financial counseling into various programs and helping people access microfinance to remove barriers to exiting poverty. Here in Canada, I worked for a multi-service agency for a while called West Neighborhood House, where we tried to bring some of those strategies to that agency and develop financial counseling programs in Canada. That led to thinking about impact and outcomes and well-being, and what it looks like when a program is making a difference. And towards those ends, got a grant to build a data platform to track financial health at the household level in relation to workforce training outcomes. And then we added a well-being survey so we could start to look at things like stress and financial well-being and mental health and things like that in relation to financial outcomes. So that program started taking on a life of its own. So I'm consulting on that project for Ontario Trillium Foundation to look at basically the learnings and the partnerships that grow from that effort. Prosper Canada has taken it on as sort of a backbone, and there's 3 agencies involved with that project right now. So that's one thing I do. I consult on other projects too. I just finished consulting on a project in the States. State of Washington, the governor set aside $200 million to reinvest in communities impacted by the war on drugs and across the state. And there was a team that was hired of consultants to do participatory research around the state and find out what community members would want to see done with that money. And then I kind of hooked in with that team to do the economic development recommendations around what community members said they wanted and needed from that investment. So that's the kind of stuff I do.
That's great. So I'm not sure if you mentioned the name of your consulting agency, but can you share with us the specific vision and mission to our viewers?
Sure. So my consulting company is called CFH Consulting. It stands for Community Financial Health Consulting. It's just I tried to brand it myself without any help. So I don't know if that really says exactly everything that it's focused on.
The name is catchy. It's definitely catchy.
Yeah, but so well-being and financial, I couldn't work well-being or quality of life into the name, because that's really what it's all about for me is, recognizing that there are historic and insidious structures in the world that extract and exploit. And that has led to, in North America, to a lot of just really like those imbalances that that I think I mentioned. And the idea is basically like CFH Consulting and the work that I do and the partners that I try to bring to it are focused on what the ecosystem needs, like what aspects are needed within an ecosystem in order to, you know, barring the North American, like America, Canada, switching to a more sort of socialist way of doing things and making sure everyone's provided for, it seems like that goal is pretty far away. So how do we increase stakeholders in the current system? How do we increase the number of people who can benefit from the structures that are in place or break through the barriers that prevent that from happening? So what pieces are needed in an ecosystem? Those are the things that I like to think about in partnerships with other people. And I'm not an expert, so the vision for my consulting work is to just partner with other people around the consulting and let everyone lend their expertise to try to figure out what pieces need to be in place in order for, you know, for some rebalancing to happen.
I love that. I think it's really necessary. So can you tell us like how you got into this work and how you're disrupting multiple ecosystems in Canada?
Yeah, I was working in food banks in the States and becoming really disenchanted with the social safety net there and how it really, really only was meant sort of to keep people at sort of below baseline and not really work towards, you know, moving from crisis to stability and then to thriving. It kind of stops at the stability point, and that only helps about 25% of the people who are in crisis. And there's 75% of folks just sort of missing all the opportunities that fall through that you know are part of that safety net. And so I started to think what could be done within the current structure to help people in a different way than just, you know, hey, give us money to buy food for the food bank, or, you know, do a food drive. So I looked at sort of the bigger picture stuff with rising housing costs and stagnant wages, and realized that I'm not the type of person who can I don't have any impact in those like macro things. I can't make property values come down and I can't make wages go up. So that's where we kind of dance around the edges, I think. Like we try food sovereignty or emergency food, or we talk about benefits to help people. You know, really the issue is that gap between how much does it cost to live and how much are you making? And do you have access to a wage that can help you sustain that life? That's the big problem. But these little things, like what's the thing that we can focus on that could help in a different way? So that's where I came to like really think, well, what about microfinance? Can we get microloans to scale in North America the way they do in other countries? This is like 2015. There was a track record of other countries using small amounts of microfinance to create jobs and businesses and things like that. But I learned quickly that it doesn't scale in the US. Like a $5,000 loan doesn't make a huge difference to a business owner who needs $100,000 to start a business. So there's this gap in, say, white business owners. White startups have, you know, $120,000 on average at startup, where Black entrepreneurs, I think the average in the US is more like $30,000 at startup. And so people don't, you know, really look too much at why that is. And you know, it's this access to capital issue, but it's all wrapped up in racism within the financial system, home ownership rates, wealth, intergenerational wealth transfer. These are things that people outside of communities that are impacted don't think about that much. And so, you know, I quickly learned that microfinance or small businesses was not really this is the way I learned it. I had a funder that was like, what if we had $250,000 to put towards small business lending? And I went to a credit union and I asked them if they could do the underwriting. And they said, no, we can't do small business loans of that size, of like, 10,000, 25,000, because it costs just as much to underwrite a $25,000 loan as it does a $250,000 loan. So we're in the business of the $250,000 loans. But if you throw that money into a loan guarantee fund, then we might be able to leverage that money in the fund as collateral, at least as collateral for folks that don't have collateral. So the idea of a loan guarantee fund is you keep this pot in reserve and you make riskier loans, or loans that are considered a little riskier because that, like, a FICO score, credit score, says the person's risky. But in real life, people aren't able to access business loans because of that FICO score situation and a bunch of other factors. So they were at least like, take that $250,000, we can do $1 million in lending. So I pulled together a meeting in my community in Tacoma, Washington. I said, what would you do with $1 million in loans? And I expected people to say, oh, we'd use that to start businesses. But people said, no, we need loans to pay off our parking tickets so we can get our driver's license back, so we can get to work. And we need loans to pay off our predatory loans or refinance our predatory loans. And we need loans to build our credit. And so that was sort of an aha moment for me around microfinance. I still had to tackle this issue of how do we mitigate the cost of underwriting for the credit union, because that was something that they said they just couldn't get past. Like, they've got underwriting staff and they have to pay them this amount of money. It's not worth it for them to do $1,000 loan or $5,000 loan. So I was like, what if I train my financial counselors to do the underwriting for you? And they do a cash flow analysis for the borrower. Basically, long story short, my financial counselors, if someone had a predatory auto loan, they were paying $600 a month for their car at 29.99% interest, which was the highest rate the state allowed for predatory auto loans. Then if my financial counselor could show that they were paying on time, even if they weren't paying anything else, even if they, were short on their rent, they couldn't pay for their food, people were paying on time for their car because they needed their car. They could live in their car if they lose their house. Like, that was the thing that our financial counselors understood. So we would say this person is paid $600 a month on time at 29.99% interest rate. You need to refinance this person down to 14%, because that will save them $200 a month, and then they can start paying their rent on time at full amount. So credit union agreed to do that as long as I guaranteed a portion of the default. I still had to say, if they don't pay back the loan, we'll cover half of it. So they accepted that. And so we started doing that in Tacoma. I went around to different agencies and said, we need more financial counselors to do this work. Pay me and I'll hire the financial counselors and embed them at your agency. So I grew from 0 to 12 financial counselors in 2 years. We were doing lots of refinancing and emergency loans and things like that. Then my wife got a job at U of T. We moved to Toronto in 2019. I left that work. I've been trying to sort of replicate that here. Not with the lending, but with just sort of making the case for financial counseling. To do that, we need to show the benefits. To show the benefits of financial counseling, we need the data platform. So that's how I got that data platform up and running. So
Wow.
anyway, that's how I got into it.
You really
then I
need to duplicate
that project in the States around the economic development recommendations for the 200 million reinvestment money. So I've just been like making connections with people and learning things, and that I get invited to do certain things and help in certain ways. So that's kind of how I do my stuff.
Absolutely. No, we really appreciate that work. Steve Harvey has always made it a point to say that if you can't pay all your bills, pay your car, because you can live in your car, but you can't drive your house. So,
Right.
So I like that you broke that down to the credit union and they saw that, they connected the dots that this is what people are doing. They're prioritizing this for these reasons. And I think that's really relative. So that's remarkable work. So what inspires you most about your current model?
You know, what inspires me the most? I don't know. I just see that there are dots that people don't connect. And there, like in the States, there are a lot of little microloan programs that show that making loans to people that a traditional financial institution thinks is risky really is fine. The default rates are the same as the loans that the banks rate high in in spaces where people think it's a riskier loan. As if people have some technical assistance and understand the cash flow, they can make good decisions about borrowing. There's really great programs out there that for entrepreneurs, for like BIPOC entrepreneurs to receive some technical assistance around starting their business and also receive a loan and not default on the loan, and the business is successful because there's access to capital that gave them a chance. You need the loan guarantee fund in those programs, so that's important, and you need the business coach in that program. But the data shows that folks aren't defaulting on those loans, but they're all these small little pilot projects. There's nothing that's broken through that creates broader access to capital for folks who traditionally can't get capital. And then there's all these dots that are connected that I think are important, like home ownership, for example. Because if you don't have a rich uncle, if you didn't inherit a house or money from your parents, if you don't have a wealthy spouse, you're starting your business with less money. And leveraging the mortgage of your home is the way that most larger businesses, medium-sized businesses, that's how they get capital to scale their business. But if home ownership rates in the Black community are 44%, and in the white community, they're 70, high 70% or low 70%, then already you've got more people in the white community able to leverage their homes to grow their business. And that's why the wealth gap, that's one of the reasons why the racial wealth gap expands. So yeah, like figuring out ways to help people access capital who don't have those mechanisms, who don't own a home, that's important to me. So those are things that excite me. And that was one of the things with this project in Washington State. We were able to build match savings and grants for people into some of the loans that they're getting in order to be on an asset acquisition journey. So like starting a business, scaling a business, owning a home, having access to grants was super important. Just like money you don't have to pay back. So we built that into the recommendations. And it looks like the state is going to implement that. So
that's great. That's exactly why I said it's so great that you're here. I'm so glad your wife got a job over here because we need you to implement that same work over here. As you know, you've been here 5 years, you know that the housing market here is just crazy. And so it's very necessary. I think there's so many memes about, not being approved for a mortgage, but paying rent that's more than a mortgage. So we appreciate you connecting the dots, and we're glad that you're here in Canada ready to connect the dots for people here.
Well, I hope, I mean, I don't know, there's very, very smart people in Canada working on this stuff. So like, I don't know how important it is that I'm here or anything like that, but it's nice of you to say. Like I like helping where I'm living. So I definitely want to be useful in Canada. I tend to get pulled into stuff in the States more, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting country to sort of be trying to do different things in. I don't think people here always love new approaches or new things. There's a lot of status quo and a lot of, I think my wife calls it tall poppy syndrome. Have you ever heard of that? where if you get too high, people cut you down.
Yes,
Uh,
that is Canada.
I didn't believe it, but it seems, I mean, not that I've been cut down, but I just feel like I see that a lot. Like people just like to maintain what's happening and not try something new because there's just not an ecosystem to support innovation and doing new stuff, like to the point where it could be.
Yeah, no, that's definitely why Canada often lags behind innovation in the US, because I think you guys are very quick to market, maybe too aggressive. And then I think we're at the other end of the spectrum where it takes a couple years to catch up.
Cool.
So what challenges or barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and your team working to overcome them?
Barriers. Well, I think a big barrier in Canada is that, and I think people recognize this, is that none of the data is disaggregated. So, where in the States, you would know, here's a stat. 14% of the United States is African American. You'd expect 14% of small business or businesses to be employer firms. So businesses that employ other people, but only 2.3% of employer firms are Black owned. So you've got a lot of sole proprietors in the US. And then so you can begin to think, oh, if we increase the number of employer owned African American firms, then you'd see a lot of economic growth, a lot of economic development, because you'd have people hiring more people. You wouldn't have these sole proprietorships that tend to shut down early or struggle to get by or don't hire a lot of people, don't contribute to the economy in the same way that a place that hires 20 or 50 or 100 people. In Canada, like, I don't think that data exists. I don't think we know. Maybe someone does, but it's hard to find. I can find maps in the US of places where there were racial covenants around home ownership. Like, where can Jewish people live? Where can Black people live? Where are only white people allowed to live? You can find that information in the US easily. You can't find it in Canada. Like, it's hard to know. So yeah, that's a big barrier, I think. Pretty big one.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that you're American makes you so used to looking at data that way and talking about data that way, because I think that even like here, your white counterparts are not even used to talking about data that way. I know when I traveled to South Africa, it's just so common to talk in color. It was so taboo here. That was 2012. I'd like to say we've evolved a bit, but I think for people who know people are Canadian, you would stand out as an American without saying that in the beginning, just because of how comfortable you are talking about race. And so I'm not surprised that that's the biggest thing for you, is that the data is not clear like that. Because Canada's not comfortable referring to anything in terms of race often.
Yeah. Like I'm looking, I think I posted about this on LinkedIn, but I'm looking at my own, like we bought a house when we moved here. It wasn't easy because it's so expensive here, but we bought a house and we had a certain rate, and didn't realize that when we refinance at the 5-year mark in January, our monthly expenses are going to go up quite a bit. And these are blanket policies that the Bank of Canada is making, like, oh, interest rates go up. My wife and I make enough where we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. We're not going to have to sell our house. But no one's thinking about the impact of people on the margins. And within the margins, no one's looking at the demographic breakdown of who's going to be impacted. And that's criminal. It is. I mean, so that means people struggling to make ends meet are going to have to sell their house or get foreclosed upon. And within that group of people, there'll be a higher percentage of Black, Indigenous, newcomer homeowners recent homeowners who thought, okay, I got in the market at this time at this rate, and now my rate's going up, and I can't afford to keep my place because I don't have the same, I don't come from privilege, I don't come from wealth. This was not inherited money that I've got sitting here for a rainy day. The people living on the margins, a higher percentage, are not white. And so your home ownership rates are going to go down in those populations, but Canada's not going to know. Maybe they'll know home ownership rates. But the not knowing also, to me, communicates a little bit not caring, right? So I don't know. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but this is stuff.
This is what we created this space for. I think sometimes you have to have someone outside come in and be like, yeah, no, there's something wrong with this. Because as you said, the community here is definitely, those people who are feeling it are definitely screaming about it. Like you said, if you don't look at it, then you don't care. That's definitely what it feels like. And that's also why there's such a huge exodus. I mean, Ontario is worse than other parts. So part of the exodus is to the East Coast, the far West Coast, but a lot of it is right out of Canada. People have been really open about that across social media platforms, all communities, especially minority communities. So yeah, it's definitely crazy, and it is affecting people in high numbers. And then I think saw another video recently about how many lock boxes were seen at a condo because they were all like Airbnbs. So you have all these international investors, real estate investors, who have no problem buying up the properties. It's obviously driving the prices to a place that people can't compete. And then also, like you said, the rates as well. So
yep,
feeling it on all sides for sure.
Yeah, it's not a good picture. It's scary in Canada right now, I think, like the next year or two.
It's been scary. So it was scary before the pandemic, and then the pandemic, and then post is not getting any better as far as the housing market goes, for sure. I love, again, remarkable work. We really champion the work that you're doing, and you're very modest, but we appreciate that you're here. I know that your spirit here is definitely going to push people to change. We need that mouthpiece. Do you have a set of priorities that you're working on right now that you haven't touched on that you'd like to highlight?
I'm really interested in so there's this community development financial institution model in the US that I mentioned, the loan guarantee fund that we use to guarantee, to sort of de-risk the money for the credit union partner around the auto loans and some of the other lending we were doing. So I think a lot of financial institution folks know about loan guarantee funds, but they're not big in Canada. There's some Indigenous loan guarantee funds that focus on sort of energy businesses that the federal government sponsors. And I think there's an Ontario one for like folks in rural communities. But the idea is the government could be putting up money for financial institutions to use as loan guarantee. So to de-risk some of the money so that financial institutions can make loans to folks that ordinarily wouldn't qualify to access that capital. And that structure is not in place in Canada. And I'm really interested in doing some sort of research to figure out how it could be. And also how it could be framed in a way where it's mainly financial institutions that are either BIPOC led or owned, or doing work authentically in communities as being the only ones that would be able to access not only the money for loan guarantee, but in the US, there's money for loan capital for those financial institutions, and there's money for operations to hire the people to sort of grow your lending apparatus and get the software you need to make the loans and track the loans. That's all in place in the US, and it's not in place in Canada. I know there's some people in the social finance world that are thinking about it, but like I'm super interested in seeing that as a mechanism here for people who need to access capital.
For sure. And so how do you feel about the future of impact investing and social finance in Canada?
Good question. I don't really know much about impact investing. And like venture capital, I know that there's the social innovation fund, the 750 some million, the 4 million that's been made available for the upcoming couple years. It's not clear to me exactly who it's for and who will be able to access it and who the gatekeepers are. So, I mean, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure people are thinking about that stuff, but I just don't know enough about it to comment on it. The thing that I just hope it's framed through is this, like, what are the mechanisms we can put in place to make sure that the money flows to people and places that are equity seeking and equity deserving. That's really what I'm hopeful about with sort of the landscape.
That's great. So what is your ultimate goal with CFHC, and what does success look like for you and your colleagues in the future?
Well, I mean, the ultimate goal with any of this stuff is to put yourself out of business, so you're not needed anymore. And the policies and systems are in place that we don't have to like constantly be fighting for economic justice or any kind of justice. So that's the ultimate goal. I don't know what I do then. I mean, I don't think that's going to be fixed by the time I'm gone from this earth. So yeah, I just my goal is just to make sure that the gap doesn't keep growing. If there's a way that we can sort of shrink and sort of bend this or tip the scales in the good direction as much as we can, that's really the best we can hope for. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day just about the need for an agreed upon baseline. Like, what is the least amount of suffering we're willing to accept as a society? And let's just get to there. Like, that's what I think is needed first.
Well, we're definitely going in the wrong direction. So I think, like you said, a baseline is where we can start, because it looks like there's no end, right? It's not looking nice.
No, not at the moment.
Do you have any additional closing thoughts or calls to action for the community?
No, I do want to hear about all the good work you're doing, and because I know you're doing good stuff. Because I asked you at the beginning, what do you do? And you told me like 3 things that sound super incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, I do a lot. I work partnering with Setsi and other organizations, both Sisters in Solidarity, with House of Nine, her network. And we are big on pushing entrepreneurship, especially for women, BIPOC women, pushing women into trades, STEM, and male-dominated spaces like executive positions, real estate, things like that. So we really like to cultivate a culture around entrepreneurship and personal and professional development. We recently founded the Black Women Procurement Network to encourage B2B and B2G as well. So that we're doing our part. We're developing co-working spaces. And with that, we actually have plans to attack the affordable housing. We'd like to see ourselves and other event space owners to sort of put a portion towards a development project around affordable housing for the BIPOC community. And we feel that we can sort of attack that crisis collectively, sort of thing. So that's a little bit about what we're doing.
Yeah. So is the Her network, is that the entrepreneurs and in the spaces?
Yeah, so HER is an acronym for Health, Aesthetics, Retail, and Resources. So that was created out of, my own challenges as a doula, wanting to create a co-working space for health, wellness, and beauty professionals. So I was working from home. I wanted to, step out from working from home. And, all co-working spaces are office spaces most of the time. And so I felt there was a need for, people who, are doing hair at home or nails out of their home and don't want to do that anymore, but are not ready for the overhead. And I also found that in, my 5 years of working in that business as a doula, that I would always have clients come in and they had their own businesses but they'd be struggling either with the marketing or the branding or, scaling some part of it or not even knowing how to register. Some people are, operating a business for years and never registered. And so I was always providing, mentorship and support around entrepreneurship. That's what really gets me fired up. I could talk about for hours. And so I wanted to just create a space to, one, be able to support and mentor, and two, have a physical, like I said, co-working space. And so that's where her network came from. No one's ever flipped the script on me.
Well, we've been
You're
going
breaking all the rules, Jeff.
40 minutes. Should you have another 40? Because I can ask you all the questions if you want.
We're gonna add you to the team. He's made a point that I haven't been interviewed yet. So I like that. But
Yeah.
it was definitely a pleasure having you on today. Really I liked a lot of great remarks that you've made. Champion the work that you're doing. Again, we're so happy that you migrated to Canada. You relocated here. Bring your great efforts. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us.
For taking the time. Really appreciate it. It was really great meeting you. And I'm definitely gonna look into the Her network and all that stuff more.
For sure. I'll definitely share my contact after this. So we want to thank you, and we just want to close the way we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on, as well as our ancestors and the elders whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build and share and work together for our collective liberation. So thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you to our listeners.